It's okay. I finished it in my head.
Yes. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Her Aversion. And this podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Aversion. We have had over 400 women grace the platform here, and we are adding another one to the bunch today. If you are listening to us live, thank you so much for being here and for jumping on live. If you are watching us on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay wherever you're watching us at so we can send you some love on whatever platform you're on. No matter if you're watching this on the replay or live, we would so appreciate it if you would share this video so we can get more eyes and more ears on the awesome content that we are about to share today. This is Her Version. This platform is built on storytelling, the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I'm speaking with an amazing woman named Amanda Kostura. Is that right?
Kostura. Yeah, you got
it. Amanda is a licensed independent social worker supervisor with over 12 years of experience in both direct practice and administrative positions in nonprofits and social service agencies. Amanda noticed there were missing elements in compassion, yes, humanity, and healing, the root causes of mental health conditions in previous positions. Ooh, these professional experiences, her own personal challenges and research on trauma and the stress disease connection led her to found Carve Your Own Path, Inc., a 501c3 nonprofit organization specializing in a holistic mind-body approach for healing and optimal wellness. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate ladies like yourself who understand the importance of jumping on every once in a while into a podcast and sharing some stuff, sharing some value. People have questions. People don't know all the things.
Yeah. I have questions. I don't know all the things. That's where I go to other people's podcasts to listen to, right?
Yes, exactly. So the whole premise of this podcast is based on, what do you know that I don't know? I believe that you know something that I don't know and that I know something that you don't know. And the only way for us to really rise in our knowings is for us to share stories, inspiration, experiences, education, courses, programs that you've been on, experiences that you have endured, to enlighten us, to let us know, hey, there's an easier, better way. It doesn't have to be so difficult in all of the things. Maybe some of the things, but not all of the things. So what's your thing? What is something that Amanda knows that everybody else should know?
Oh, it's such a big question. How do I encapsulate that all in a nice, pretty answer? All right, so I'll just share it kind of through my own experience, right? So I do, I went to school, I got my master's degree in social work, I did my training, I did my clinical time, I practiced, right? I understood mental health conditions and diagnoses, and there was a huge part missing that I didn't know was missing because I thought I had the education I need. I thought I had the experience I need. I did the things that the people told me to do to be where I needed to be, right? And then I found myself working in a supervisory position for a community mental health organization, 70 hours a week, probably not paid 70 hours a week, working 70 hours a week, evenings, weekends, stressed out, overwhelmed, fulfilled in all of the ways, not feeling like I could empower my clients and help them actually heal the root of what led them there, and not feeling like could empower my staff to grow professionally and make meaningful work in what they were doing. And I got to my own point where my physical and mental health was at an all-time low, high, I don't know how you want to look at it. I had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and I was flaring constantly. I was using FMLA all the time to take off work. I was having really scary, active, suicidal thoughts that I'd never had before. And I realized I am so stressed and overwhelmed and stretched thin. And this is contributing to my physical and mental health. And it was at that point that I started to go down the rabbit hole of what is called the stress disease connection. We have been showing this in our medical research for over 100 years that stress creates conditions on our body that are not good for our mental health, that are not good for our physical health. And over time, when we ignore that stress, it builds and builds and builds and builds. Your body lets you know. It gives you warning signs like insomnia and tension and headaches and anxiety attacks, all these little breadcrumbs where your body's like, hey, we're not okay. And we're like, oh, it's fine. I got to go to work. Yeah, I have another meeting. Oh, I got to go pick the kids up. I don't have time to deal with this thing, right? And one day your body says, I told you. I tried to tell you. You wouldn't listen to me. Now I'm going to sit you down. And it sits you down with a chronic health condition, like it did me. It sits you down with a cancer diagnosis, right? And people wonder, how the heck did I get here? And it's at that point where they're like, oh, I need to do something different with my life.
Absolutely. What's so interesting about this is when I think of social worker, I think of somebody who kind of sort of has all their shit together.
Sure don't.
And then you're telling me that you're in a situation, you're in an environment, that's causing the stress.
Yep.
Wow.
I am so glad you brought that up because that's a myth that I want to debunk, right? Just because your doctor is a doctor doesn't mean they don't also have high blood pressure or diabetes or, right? Like they also have health, right? And I also have health and mental health. Just because I understand and can work with people and have compassion and resources and education for these things doesn't mean that I also don't need to work on them myself. And that's a huge myth in our culture as far as therapists and helpers in that way, that we have it all figured out and I'm coming to share how to fix it for you, right? I have my own path, you have your own path. I can give you the resources and tools. You might need to figure that out, but at the end of the day, you're the expert on your life, and we all have challenges. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah. I would love for you to talk a little bit about this cookie cutter approach that a lot of, social workers just in general are taught, as opposed to maybe a different way of doing things.
Yeah, I think the medical model in general also kind of approaches things that way. I think that honestly, so many different industries do. The financial industry, right? Things that have places that have been doing things a certain way for so many years that they just do it because this is what we've always done, right? The world isn't how it's always been, and you have to take that into account. If we're not looking at people as individuals in the most beautiful way, right? You are the culmination of your culture, your experiences, your history, your identity, there's so many different parts to each of us that we can't say, hey, what worked to help me with my fibromyalgia or my depression or my ADHD is going to work for you, right? And so I was seeing this, right? It was like, hey, this is the evidence-based treatment. Let's do cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Replace your thoughts and then your life will be changed. Rarely in the way that the world is now, if you live in America, at least in a capitalistic patriarchy that's very oppressive to many populations, you can't just think your way out of those systemic issues. And so it was very invalidating for many folks, right? And I was like, but that's people's thoughts aren't the problem. I was working with so many people that had complex PTSD from the neglect, the abuse, the lack of attachment that they had in their childhoods, right? These are root cause things from childhood that led them to be using substances, to cope with those feelings, right? But the substances weren't the problem. The way that they thought weren't the problem. It was that root cause, and we needed to get to what happened to you and how does your culture, how does your family, how does your access to resources impact all of that.
Yeah. When you say root causes, can you give us a little more context on what exactly that is?
Yeah. So for somebody, it's interesting because I was working a lot with people that were using opiates. So, pills, Percocets, things like that, but also, heroin. And people, there's such a stigma and a judgment toward those folks. Like, ugh, how could you just like wake up one day and put a needle in your arm? Nobody does that. Nobody
Mhm.
like nobody wakes up tomorrow and says, I'd like to just, inject some heroin today. You have to have had such a painful life experience over and over and over again. Something really tragic happened to you, or multiple things happened to you. You feel so disconnected from other folks, so isolated, so unloved. So many sad experiences culminate to just trying to either feel euphoria, like feel happiness, feel something good because everything has been bad, or not feel at all and just numb out because everything is awful, right? So when we look at people and we think, well, you just got to change your behavior and change how you think and change, then you'll just magically be better. And we don't ever get to that root trauma that happened to someone and fix the systems around them that are still contributing to those feelings, getting them more support, getting them better access to resources, making them feel more fulfilled in their life, getting them meaningful connections with others. We're not going to get to the root, and we're not going to have a holistic approach, and we're going to have them keep cycling back through these treatment facilities doors or criminal justice system doors.
Yeah. When you had mentioned change your thoughts and how that's kind of a cookie cutter approach to all of the things, but not taking into consideration root causes, identity, culture, society, all of that stuff. What is one or two other means besides changing the story or reframing that somebody do when they are enduring some sort of a challenge or some sort of a struggle in their life?
Yeah. So I'm not here to say that replacement thoughts aren't great. I use them all the time for myself, right? Sometimes you just need a little kick in the butt to get yourself on the right track. And that doesn't mean ignoring how you got to that place to begin with, right? So it might mean, let me reframe this. So I talked to a lot of coaches about like understanding the difference between coaching and therapy and when to refer and all of those great things. And I think coaching is wonderful, mindset work is wonderful. And we were talking about this on a performance, like athletic related mindset podcast we did recently, where in that moment when you're playing a game, you don't have time to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing that thing again because I have perfectionism and I don't feel worthy because my parents made me blah, blah, blah. Like, you don't have time in that moment when you need to shoot the ball to think and process all of that, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a time and a place. However, you don't ignore it either. So you can recognize and say, oh, that's a perfectionism thing again, and know where it's coming from and shelf it. And later,
Mhm.
when you're done with the game, you can go journal or you can talk to someone or you can bring it to your next therapy session, right? So I just want to point out that like there's a time and a place for that, but you also have to go do the back end work behind it to do the healing and figure out why that keeps coming up for you. So journaling, amazing. If we kept all of this in our brain all the time, that's why people have such a challenging time. We cannot keep all of these thoughts in there all the time. Just, it doesn't have to make sense. This is something I wanted to talk on too. Sorry, it's a little tangent from what you said, but I'll mention journaling, and some people just immediately and they just, I don't want to do it. Sounds terrible. I want no part in it. Or they'll say they'll do it, and then every week they come back and they haven't done it. And I'm like, what's going on? And when I've gotten to the root of this with people, it's that they think that journaling has to be this like beautifully constructed diary entry, right? It has to have a beginning and a middle and an end, and it's got to be signed, loved, Amanda, right? No, not at all. Like, there are so many different ways to journal. You can just brain dump, whatever comes out of your brain, let it flow. It doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to have sentence structure. You can go find an old book and journal out of that by finding words that make sense and do some poetry. You can journal with art. There's so many different ways that you can bullet journal, right? So just the point is, get all of that overwhelm and stress out of your brain. And then you might start to see themes that are coming up for you when you do that, and recognize, oh, I notice that I'm really hard on myself in these certain situations. Maybe that's something I need to work on. So journaling is huge, because that's going to give you the insight you need into what's truly going on. And it's one of the best ways that you can get under like the subconscious of what's going on, rather than what's on the surface. Get a therapist. You don't need to be having significant mental health challenges to get support for what's going on. Adjusting to things like a job promotion, a marriage, like something that you wanted even, right, is inherently stressful. Our brains are very smart and adaptive, and also kind of lazy, because they're going to take the path to least resistance. So when you know that you're going to have this really great job promotion that you've been working so hard for, your brain also says, ding, ding, ding. Oh my God, smoke alarms. This is terrible, that we could die. Like, we don't know anything about this. There's so much unknown. We've never been a supervisor before. We don't know what to expect, right? And all the worry can come. So things like that are reasons that you can have a support system in place, like a therapist, to process and get some coping skills for. What I'm trying to go back to your original question. You asked me for
just a couple of other things besides the changing thoughts.
Yeah. So journaling is wonderful. Having someone to bounce ideas off of, whether it's a therapist, coach, peer support person. I'm trying to think of other things that I use. There's so many different, a lot of them are therapeutic interventions. Tapping is really wonderful. If you've never learned of tapping, emotional freedom technique, you can Google it. You can find it on YouTube. We don't know why it works, but scans of the body show you that when you tap on these certain meridian points on your body, it decreases your cortisol, takes your stress brain offline, and puts your logical thinking brain back online, so you can think clearly before you make a decision that might have some long-term benefits if you just reactively respond to it.
Beautiful. As far as anxiety and depression, which I think is kind of rampant at this exact moment, would those things kind of help with those?
Yeah, so another skill you can use, which I think is super key in those areas, is mindfulness. And that kind of get a bad rep. So when I say mindfulness for folks, a lot of people think, like, for the people that are watching on video, it's like, well, you can't see my knees, but like, you're like the Buddhist monk, and you're like, have your arms on your knees, and you're like, right? And you're just able to just clear your brain entirely and not think of anything, right? It's again, it's kind of like with the journaling. We have this picture of what we think it's supposed to be. And if we don't want to do that or can't do that, then we're not going to do it at all. That is not mindfulness at all, right? The goal is not that you clear your brain. The goal is that you start to notice the thoughts that are coming to your brain in the present moment, and not attach emotion or judgment to it, right? So when I'm doing a restorative yoga session and I'm just trying to meditate, I have thoughts come to me all the time, because I'm not perfect. And it'll be like, oh man, I wonder what we're going to do about right now. I'm meditating. I can worry about that later, right? And it's just bringing yourself back to the present moment. The reason I bring up mindfulness is that people that typically with depression or anxiety, an underlying concern there is that they're worried about the future, anxiety, or they're sad or feel like they could do something different or wish they could do something different about the past, right? So mindfulness is one of the ways that you can truly be present in the present moment and not be so focused on the future or the past. You can use mindfulness in so many ways. Yes, you can sit there and meditate if you'd like. They have guided meditations you can listen to and have someone guide you through it. You can also do things like the 5 senses. What are 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, and really describe it to yourself, right? And go through the senses. You can, when you're washing the dishes, if you actually do that, if you have hand wash things you need to wash, right? A lot of us have dishwashers. Just wash the dishes, right? Think about washing the dishes. And then when you have a thought of like, all right, I got to switch laundry, Right now I'm washing the dishes. The water is so warm and I can feel the suds and the sliminess of the bubbles on my hands. And I just poked myself with the fork and I can smell the lemon of the soap, right? Like just be in the moment as much as you possibly can.
Beautiful. I love this concept that you're talking about as far as journaling, because I think that that is an issue that a lot of people come to conclude. First of all, that it's a female thing, so like a Dear Diary thing,
Hmm.
and then I remember there was a section there probably about 2 years ago where I was actually reading my journals. I've been journaling since I was like 12, and every Monday I would come on live and I'd read from my journal in chronological order. And yeah, it's very much like, this is what I did today, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow, this is how I feel today. And I love this concept of it can look like however you want it to look like. It's just getting it down on paper, whatever looks right for you. And no one is going to read it. Like, no one cares. No one's looking at it.
Yep.
And it can look however you want to look, even as much as spelling errors or grammar doesn't really matter.
Yeah, this brings to mind, I had a male client actually that I would recommend it to, and they'd be like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. And then they just wouldn't do it. And so I was like, all right, captive audience, we're in session right now. Hey, you're really stressed with all these things you have going on. Do you have a piece of paper and pen? Because it's telehealth, right? Yeah, hold on, give me a minute, right? And they get a paper and pen, and I could tell like they're a little like I don't want to do this thing, right? I literally gave them the space in our therapy session for them to just word vomit, brain dump, whatever they needed to on this piece of paper. And you could see as they were writing, literally, Sabrina, I'll tell you, I could literally see the tension and stress leaving this man's body as he was just getting things out of his brain. And I checked in with him afterward, and well, actually, I didn't even have to check in. He finished and he was like, had his pen down. He's like, yeah, I kind of feel a lot better. I was like, dude, you were literally journaling for 1 minute. Like it just changed over to a minute, and that's all it took, right? But in our brain, we make it into this giant mountain of all the things that we can't do, right? And when you just do it, the relief, that's something I teach people too, is scaling. So like if you want to know the therapeutic term for that, it's a subjective units of distress scale, SUD scale. But you can just call it scaling. Like 0 to 10, 0 is like you're in a coma, or like, you're like the most relaxed you've ever been in your entire life. And 10 is like full on heightened panic, the most dysregulated you've ever been. Check in with yourself before you journal, before you go for a walk, before you talk to a friend, right? Check in with yourself. How do you feel on that scale? If he was at a 9 after he journaled, he was at a 7. Could you still do work to keep moving down the scale? Yes. But now you have tangible data that backs up why you did that thing. So next time you think about doing it, your brain has more of a reason to do it because it has collected data on the benefits of it for you, right? And you have something tangible to work toward, rather than just like, all right, I'll do the thing. I guess I'll do the thing because I think it's good for me, but I don't really know if it's good for me.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. And something I've never even thought of before, like giving yourself scientific proof, and like your own, not like something you read in a magazine where they're like 97% of all people. It's
Yep.
your own data.
Yep. Because that's the part of it too. We don't realize the stress disease connection, right? Our emotions are stored in our body if we don't process them. So all of that overwhelm and stress and anxiety and worry about the future, right? That builds as tension, right? And like I said, I could literally see it leaving his body. That's what leads to these chronic health conditions that you end up, one of my last few positions before I fully stepped out was in integrated care. So I was in doctor's offices, and the amount of people that I would see that had so many chronic health conditions, so many medications, so many specialists. And I was the first person in their whole journey that said, how's your stress and how do you manage it? What's your home life like? How's your family? Anything ever stressful or painful or traumatic happen to you? What was your childhood like? How were your parents involved with you, right? Like, general questions that seem normal to me because of the way I'm trained, but in our modern medical system, they don't get asked, right? Because it's what's your symptoms? What's your symptoms? And I'm over here like, where did those symptoms come from, right? That's where and then my own experiences, like I said in the beginning, it just became really clear to me that we weren't doing enough, even though it's been in the medical research for 100 years. We're not doing enough on the preventative end.
Yeah. What should somebody expect to feel as they are stepping into their healing journey? Let me back up for a moment. One step, the identity. I think that this is really important in the context of what we're talking about, because it's easy to say, if we're even just taking anxiety and depression, and you gave us some wonderful things: change your thoughts, journaling, sit down with a therapist / coach, EFT, tapping. But if somebody is connected to their anxiety and depression as part of their identity, something that like is them, it makes it a little more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
How does somebody begin to step into, well, first of all, what is identity? That'd probably be a first question that I should probably ask you. Second, how does somebody begin to change that or alter their persona to shift?
I don't typically have a blank answer or a blank response to questions, but that one's kind of stumping me because identity is so individualized, right? Identity is so malleable and transformation. Like identity can change from day to day based on new experiences, new information. If I just think we work heavily with the LGBTQ plus population, and so for a lot of those folks, it's not until they talk to other queer folks like them or they find new terms that better help them fit into where they feel naturally. So identity is a very personal experience. It's a culmination of your life experiences. It's a culmination of your generational like DNA, literally, like your trauma and your stress and anything else that's passed on through our DNA. Yeah, that one's kind of stumping me, and it's rare, but identity is so individualized that it's hard to have one concrete answer for it. And many people, when they come to counseling, do have that kind of all or nothing with the depression or whatever is going on with them, is like either the doctor did the scale on me and identified that I have major depressive disorder, so I'm just depressed all the time, or I'm bipolar, and they'll use that as a a thing out there in the world, like, oh, that's just my bipolar, and that stays surface for me, right? Like when we identify with that language, that's only identifying with the symptoms, and it's not identifying with and giving grace and compassion for everything that led up to that, right? I don't know if that helps.
When you're talking, did you say that you work with individuals with opioids and?
I used to in previous positions, yeah.
Because that's identity. So if you go to AA, I am an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
I am whatever the illness. Does there need to be some change for the I am statement in order for it to be a true pivot out of that story?
That's a hard one. There's a lot of talk of that in our field. Actually, it's really interesting you brought up that, like the AA, NACA, all of the A's community, 12-step community, because we do talk about that. If we're in a trauma-informed environment and we're trying to work on therapeutic goals, we don't want someone, well, not that we don't want, but we discourage people from just choosing this one part of themselves that they chose to cope with not because they wanted to, but because no one else gave them a coping skill. No one else gave them any other bag of tools to use. And someone offered this tool and it worked. And so that's what they go with now, right? It's the same with anger and violence. And I mean, there's so many other ways that we cope, sex and gambling, right? Once you're introduced to something that helps that feeling some, of course, some people are wired differently than others for addiction to make that, roll into that. But yeah, there's a big discussion in our field about that. And we kind of just leave it up to the individual on how they want to identify. There's some folks that don't like the 12-step community because of that. They think that they're much more than an addict or an alcoholic. For others, it's a reminder for them of why they can never do it again, right? So again, I think it's a very individualized approach. Because of who I am, try to not encourage people to identify as that one thing. But for some people, that's what keeps them sober. That's what makes life more fulfilling for them. And that community really keeps them going. So I'm never going to be the one to say like, no, I am judging you and that's not how you should do it. Whatever works for them.
Yeah. Makes sense. I totally agree with that. That was one of my, I got sober 17 years ago on my own.
Congrats.
I didn't even know AA was a thing until I met my fiance about 5 years ago. And he went through the whole program, detox, rehab, AA. And he introduced me to AA. And I was already well into my coaching and certifications and all that stuff. And when I first stepped into an AA meeting, I was like, red flags everywhere. I was like, oh my God. This is horrible.
That could honestly be a whole episode in itself. We talk a lot about that with like step 4. You're going through, you're doing this inventory and you're sharing all these really personal traumas and taking, for someone that was like abused or, trafficked or these really horrible things, like they're trying to find their part in it, which is, but also just you're doing that with someone that's not a clinician. They're not trained to do that. They're not trained to deal with the repercussions of you opening up those really old wounds. So yeah, we always recommend that people that are going to do something like the steps of AA are also involved with a therapist to help you process all the things that come along with that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's sick people helping sick people in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is the number one lesson that you have learned about life?
Listen to your body.
Ooh.
And it's probably because my mom instilled that with me. She's worked in the medical field her whole life, and she just had so many patient stories. And it ended up true for her and I in our own experiences. And now I see it with so many clients is, especially when you have chronic health conditions, or if you present and with a health condition and also already have a mental health diagnosis, sometimes there's a different approach to how you're treated. And it's just anxiety. It's fine. And a lot of people get dismissed. Be a strong advocate for yourself. I'm aware of the privilege that comes along with that. Not everyone has access to the resources they need to build the team of experts and supporters that they need, but don't let someone tell you how you feel about your body. Don't let someone tell you about your symptoms that you feel every day. You're the only one that experiences that and has to live in that every day. So if someone gives you an opinion or a diagnosis and you don't agree with it, absolutely, if you're within your capacity, seek a second opinion, third opinion, fourth opinion, fifth opinion. Don't stop until you find the people that are going to be in your corner and truly help you feel better.
That's beautiful. So the name of your company, Carve My Path. What does that mean?
So it's actually, we're in a process of rebranding right now, which is super exciting. So it's, our organization is actually Carve Your Own Path. We had some domain name issues when we bought it, so we pivoted to Carve My Path, and that'll actually be changing soon. So Carve Your Own Path, it kind of came out of my own journey, right? Like nobody told me what to do when I got my master's, got my independent license, I got all the letters I possibly could. I did all the training I could. I got in a position where I was like, yeah, I'm ready to save the world. And then it was all just like, I didn't know what to do. What do? You go to the next agency that's probably going to be just as bad. And so that's where I did the thing that didn't make sense, and I was terrified, but I did it anyway because I didn't know what else to do. I left without having another job lined up for the first time ever in my life. And from that moment on, I realized I'm kind of carving my own path. The next job that I applied for was 40 hours full time. I said, hey, I'm trying to build a nonprofit on the side. Can I do 24? They said, I thought they were going to laugh at me, right? Who does that? And they said, let me talk to HR. And then they came back and said, we can do 32. And I said, okay. And then slowly but surely, that's where I started negotiating for myself and just asking, like, what's the worst that can happen? They're going to say no. And, oh, like, I can't build a nonprofit. I don't know. Who says so? Google. How do I do that? Friends, family, supporters. How do I do that? Right? Like, not just taking what people say or what you think is the answer as the answer. Go figure it out on your own. Be creative. The world now, I mean, people can make money doing dating shows on TikTok, okay? Like, you can do anything. You just have to be creative with it and be willing to endure, and have a really great support system in place for when you need to endure some tough times, because you're carving a new path, literally, right? And then the other part of it too is the brain, and neuroscience. So that's kind of the hidden message in it, is that we all have neuroplasticity. Your brain has dug out the same path for many years of how it responds to a certain situation, and that's what it knows. And that might be why you're reactive or why you use substances or whatever the thing is, right? It doesn't have to be that way. We can carve a new path out. It just takes some time.
Yeah. I heard a really great analogy about like a foot of snow. When you're first walking through a foot of snow, it's like super, super difficult and heavy and cold and ridiculous and silly. But the more and the more you keep walking that path, the new path through the snow, it compacts down. And then soon enough, it actually becomes slippery, where you just slip through. You don't even think about it. You just slide through this new way of doing it, but it takes a second to carve it out.
Yeah.
That's
and it makes sense too, because again, brains are very smart, but also kind of lazy. So if they're like, wait, I already have like, it's scary and dark, and like there's a lot of twists and turns and potholes in the road, but we know this route. Okay. I don't know what's over there.
Yeah, definitely. So we have quite a few people watching live. By the way, thank you so much for being here, for hanging out with us. And I'm sure we'll have plenty more on the replay. Who should be contacting you? Obviously, they're resonating with you, your story, your expertise. Who should be contacting you? Who do you work with? And where can they find you?
Yeah. So if you're in Ohio and you want identity affirming, culture affirming, not cookie cutter treatment for mental health, we can serve you in that way. You can visit carvemypath.org and hop on our newsletter to get updated on the latest changes. Again, like I said, we're rebranding, so that website is going to change here soon, but hop on the email list now. And then I love speaking. I love presenting on everything I've talked about: stress, disease, connection, mental health, how we need each other, how we need connection. So any speaking opportunities or presenting conferences, those things, I love all of those opportunities. And we're a nonprofit. So if you have, a desire to give and give out of your way for charitable giving, we are always open to those opportunities. There's a donations tab on our website where you can become a one-time or recurring donor.
Beautiful. Why do you do what you do?
It's such a good question. And then my answer to it is, like, I didn't choose the social work life. The social work life chose me. I actually needed all of I was glad that my mom hoarded all my old, all my old things from childhood, but a lot of it was schoolwork. And I ended up needing it when I recently, in the past couple of years, got late diagnosed ADHD. And I was looking at all of those papers and all those things. And there was one from maybe first or second grade. It was at the very first day. And it said, the question was about your teacher, like, what do you look for in a teacher, or something along those lines, like what makes a really good teacher? And it was like, teachers accept everyone no matter what they look like. Teachers will all like it was little social worker Amanda in first grade, right? And all of my like writings and I was always a helper. My family life experiences led me to being in helping positions. So I was just kind of bred for this, but I didn't know what it was. I got into like my third year of undergrad in psychology and I was like, oh, what am I going to do with my life? Because you can't do much with a psych bachelor's, where I found a social work graduate program and was like, oh, I guess that's what I'm here for. Okay, found my people.
That's
So
great.
long answer short is, I don't know. It chose me and I guess I was just bred for it.
That's great. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
That's all. That's where I usually say, listen to your body. So I'll reaffirm that. And thank you for having me. I love the energy. I love it. It's so good to be in good space with other good humans. And congratulations on your own healing journey, because that is not easy at all.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of hard work and commitment.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for being here, Amanda. I so appreciate you hanging out, sharing some of your goodness with us. For those of you that are watching live, and for those of you that are watching on the replay, thank you for being here. If you resonated with Amanda and all the goodness that she shared today, make sure to check her out. Clickable link is in the description wherever you are watching us at, and it also is above her head area if you want to screenshot it. We love to connect people here on this platform in order to make sure we all continue to rise. Thank you so much for joining us here on this platform. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you follow, like, subscribe. Reach out to me at hernation.life if you are interested in sharing some of your value. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others.